all. On behalf of the University of Bergen, it's a great pleasure to welcome you to the announcement of this year's Holberg Prize and Nils Klim Prize. The Holberg Prize was established by the Norwegian Parliament in 2003. The prize is awarded annually to a scholar who has made outstanding contributions to research in the humanities, social sciences, law and theology, either in one of these fields or through interdisciplinary work. The prize is a recognition of scholars who have made a decisive impact on international research. The Holberg Board also awards the Nils Klim Prize. The prize is awarded to young scholars working in or coming from Nordic countries who excel in the same fields. Through more than 20 years of existence, the Holberg Prize and Nils Klim Prize have contributed to honoring a long list of outstanding academics. The prize has contributed to our joint academic responsibility to create space for critical thinking and open debate in the spirit of the Enlightenment thinker and philosopher Ludvig Holberg, who the prize is named after. We live in a time of many challenges. One word that is used increasingly often to describe the state of the world is perma-crisis. And times like this call for our academic values more than ever. We need researchers who push the boundaries of what we know, scholars who contribute with bold interpretations of the present, and we need spaces where we can meet across intellectual traditions to share and to discuss ideas. We need strong research that can provide us with an understanding of our societies. I know that the Holberg Prize and the Nils Klim Prize will yet again contribute to a renewed critical discourse. It is therefore with great excitement that I give the floor to the chairman of the Holberg Board, Professor Jørgen Sejersted, who will announce the Holberg Prize and the Nils Klim Prize laureates for 2024. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Margaret Hagen, Rector of the University of Bergen. The Holberg Prize was established by the Norwegian Parliament in 2003 and was awarded for the first time in 2004. And as Rector said, each year the Holberg Board awards 2 prizes in the academic fields of the humanities, social sciences, law and theology. These 2 prizes are the International Holberg Prize and the Nordic Nils Klim Prize. In 2024, these will both be awarded for the 21st time. The prizes are awarded by the Holberg Board on behalf of the University of Bergen and the Norwegian government, and on the recommendation of academic committees. The academic committees consist of internationally renowned scholars from relevant disciplines. And the prizes celebrate groundbreaking academic achievements. The award ceremony for the Holberg Prize and the Nils Klim Prize takes place in Bergen in June every year. This year's award ceremony will be held here at the University Aula on the 6th of June. And now, first to the Holberg Prize, awarded annually to scholars who have made outstanding contributions to research, either within one discipline or through interdisciplinary work. The prize is named, as we heard, after the Danish-Norwegian scholar Ludvig Holberg, who was an exceptional writer and intellectual of the 18th century. The Holberg Prize laureate must have had a decisive influence on international research, and the value of the prize is 6 million Norwegian kroner, or approximately 530,000 euros. On behalf of the University of Bergen, and on the recommendation of the Holberg Committee, It is a great pleasure for me to announce that the board of the Holberg Prize has decided that this year's Holberg Prize shall be awarded to Professor Achille Mbembe. Professor Achille Mbembe is a Cameroonian political theorist and historian, writing on African history and politics, on colonialism and its post-colonial consequences. Mbembe is a researcher professor at the Wits Institute for Social and Economic Research at the Witwatersrand University, Johannesburg. He obtained his PhD in history at the University of Sorbonne in Paris, France in 1989. He subsequently obtained the DEA in political science at the Institut d'études politiques de Paris. Mbembe has held appointments at Columbia University in New York, Brookings Institution in Washington, D.C., University of Pennsylvania, University of California, Berkeley, Yale University, and Duke University. He has been Executive Secretary of the Council for the Development of Social Science Research in Africa in Dakar, Senegal. Chair of the Holberg Committee, Professor Heike Krieger of Freie Universität Berlin, will now present the committee's review of the contributions of Achille Mbembe's work.
Born in Cameroon in 1957, Achille Mbembe obtained his PhD from Université Paris Panthéon-Sorbonne in 1989 on the history of anti-colonial resistance in Cameroon. Mbembe is currently a research professor of history and politics at Wits Institute for Social and Economic Research at Witwatersrand University. From 1996 to 2000, Mbembe was the executive secretary of CODESRIA, the Council for the Development of Social Science Research in Africa. He has held positions at various universities including Berkeley, California, Columbia, Duke, Harvard, and Yale. He has been a visiting professor at Maison de la Science de l'Homme in Paris and has been awarded several honorary doctorates. Mbembe is recognized as one of the foremost thinkers of post-colonial Africa and is a key critical theorist of the planetary. He has played a major role in advancing thinking on racism and its effects on subjectivity, particularly through the concept of the racial subject. Mbembe's refusal of all forms of racism also draws inspiration from the uneven impact of the climate crisis on the global South. This is encapsulated in his most recent work, Brutalism. Mbembe's early work focused on colonial violence, African resistance, and struggles for independence. This analyzed the nature of state power and led him to rethink the notion of the post-colony. His key books, many of which have been translated from the original French, include On the Post-Colony, Necropolitics, Out of the Dark Night, Brutalism, and The Earthly Community, Reflections on the Last Utopia. These cover a broad range of themes, including the contradictions inherent in democracy, race, ethnicity, biopolitics, and identity politics within African nation-states. Mbembe's groundbreaking Critique of Black Reason is a philosophical study of the meaning of blackness as it historically emerged. It assesses how the term black was used to dehumanize in the interest of capital. The analyses show how blackness was associated with being non-human or animal-like, justifying the reproduction of oppressive and exploitative structures. Mbembe argues that some black critiques of race have implicitly reproduced the epistemology of racial difference. His gaze has recently shifted to developments in the current colonial imperial world, the nature of late Eurocentrism, the impact of the Anthropocene, and the implications of artificial intelligence for humans. Mbembe's oeuvre goes beyond a particularized notion of decolonization to a universalist recentering of the human. For him, This involves a dedication to facing historical truth while learning and remembering across South-North divides. Achille Mbembe is undoubtedly a highly worthy recipient of the 2024 Holberg Prize.
Thank you, Professor Heike Krieger, for the committee's review. And now to the Nils Klim Prize. The prize is awarded annually to a researcher under 35 years of age. The prize is named after the protagonist of Holberg's utopian novel, Nils Klim's Underground Travels, from 1741. The researcher must be from or work in a Nordic country in the fields covered by the prize. The prize is awarded to researchers who have made outstanding contributions, either within one discipline or through interdisciplinary work. In the assessment of the nominated candidate, the independence and innovative qualities of the researcher's work are deemed particularly important. The committee also takes into account whether the research contribution is especially outstanding or promising in light of the scholar's age, the nature of the research project, and the traditions in the researcher's academic field. The value of the prize is 500,000 Norwegian kroner, approximately 43,000 euros. On behalf of the University of Bergen and on the recommendation of the Nils Klim Committee, it is now my great pleasure to announce that the board of the Holberg Prize has decided that this year's Nils Klim Prize shall be awarded to Professor Sareen. Sareen is Professor of Energy and Environment in the Department of Media and Social Sciences at the University of Stavanger in Norway. He also holds a position as Professor 2 within the Center for Climate and Energy Transformation at the University of Bergen. Sareen holds a double PhD degree from 2016 in Development Studies at the University of Copenhagen, Denmark, and in Forest and Nature Management at the University of Padua, Italy. He has been a project associate at the Indian Institute of Technology, Madras, and has held visiting researcher positions at Erfurt University, University of Washington, Seattle, University of Sussex, and here at the University of Bergen. Sareen's research fields include energy governance, sustainability transitions, human geography, political ecology, accountable governance, science and technology studies, digitalization and metrics, and more. The chair of the Nils Klim Committee, Professor Astradur Eysteinsson of the University of Iceland, will now present the committee's review of the contributions of Sareen's work. Professor Eysteinsson's review will be followed by greetings from Norwegian Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Støre and the Norwegian Minister of Research and Higher Education, Oddmund Hoel.
The Nils Klim Committee recommends that Siddharth Sareen receive the 2024 Nils Klim Prize. Siddharth Sareen is Professor of Energy and Environment in the Department of Media and Social Sciences at the University of Stavanger in Norway. He also holds a 20% position as Professor 2 within the Center for Climate and Energy Transformation at the University of Bergen. In 2016, Sareen completed a double PhD degree in Development Studies at the University of Copenhagen and Forest and Nature Management at the University of Padua, Italy. He then went on to work as a visiting scholar and research fellow in the US, the UK, Norway, India, and Germany, strengthening his engagement with an array of research topics. In his more recent scholarly capacity at the Universities of Bergen and Stavanger, he has expanded his international reach and academic liaisons in accord with the global and collaborative nature of his study areas. In the course of his remarkable career, building on an interdisciplinary basis where the social sciences and humanities cross paths with technological as well as environmental sciences and challenges. Siddharth Sareen has established himself as a creative researcher and academic supervisor. He directs the Sustainability Transformation Program area at the Faculty of Social Sciences in Stavanger, which has links to partner institutions both in Norway and abroad. His publishing record is highly impressive, especially given the range of his research topics, broadly covering governance of energy transitions of various scales and in different environments. These topics involve the intricacies of sustainability and accountability, energy history, environmental justice, urban and non-urban geography, democratic grounding, and social inclusion. Professor Sareen's versatility and broad perspective are also reflected in how he pursues his projects, sometimes as a single researcher and author, but often as a member of a team, numbering from 2 to 36. The latter is the case in an article published in the journal Energy Research and Social Science in 2022 under the heading Beyond Technology, a research agenda for social sciences and humanities research on renewable energy in Europe. This title is distinctive for Sareen's academic pursuits, with a notable exception that his research also extends to sites beyond Europe. His work is exemplary for the global importance of critical and interactive relationships between fields of scholarship, technology, and industry in the vital search for renewable and sustainable sources of energy. For all the reasons stated, Siddharth Sareen is a most worthy recipient of the 2024 Nils Klim Prize.
The Holberg Prize honors outstanding scientific work in the field of humanities, social sciences, law, and theology. This year we honor Professor Achille Mbembe at the University of Witwatersrand, Johannesburg, in South Africa.
Dear Professor Mbembe, congratulations to you on your groundbreaking work and impressive achievements. The Holberg Prize is a celebration of you as a scholar, but it is also a celebration of the academic fields of the humanities and the social sciences in a broad sense. I would also like to congratulate Professor Siddharth Sareen on receiving the Nils Klim Prize. Today we celebrate your outstanding work and acknowledge the global and collaborative nature of your study areas, as cited by the Nils Klim Committee.
Norway is a knowledge nation, but most of the challenges we face as a society are global. We depend on research-based knowledge and expertise to understand and resolve these challenges. The Holberg Prize and the Nils Klim Prize help emphasize the importance of research and curiosity. So, on behalf of the Norwegian government, congratulations to you both, and welcome to Norway and Bergen in June.
Thank you, Professor Astradur Eysteinsson, for presenting the committee's review. Thank you to the Prime Minister and to the Minister for Research and Higher Education for their greetings to the laureates. And last but not least, thank you to Tore Bordal for having provided us with two beautiful musical pieces today. The first was Brudefølge drar forbi, or The Bridal Procession, by the Norwegian composer Edvard Grieg. And this was followed now by La Fille aux cheveux d'Allah, a piece by Claude Debussy. We now move on in our program, and I am happy to be able to welcome you all to a brief conversation about the two prize recipients. For this purpose, I would like to welcome onto the stage Associate Professor Kari Sejersted and Professor Kjetil Rommetveit, and our Academic Director, Professor Bjørn Enge Bertelsen, who will moderate the discussion. Please take the floor.
Thank you very much for that, Professor Jørgen Sejersted, Chair of the Holberg Board, and it is indeed a great pleasure for me to have you two here on stage for a brief conversation, and I have to apologize to the audience who would like to stay here the whole day. This will be a brief conversation, but there will be ample time to discuss both laureates in June, and before that also, I hope, but for now, a brief conversation. Welcome to both of you. And let us start by talking a bit about the Holberg Prize laureate first. And in that regard, I am really happy to have with me Associate Professor Kari Sejersted. Sejersted is the head of Department for the Center for Women's and Gender Research here at the University of Bergen. She's a literary scholar, and she has particularly worked with issues such as feminist critique and post-colonial theory, and has engaged topics related to power, gender, and philosophy. And perhaps very relevantly for this year's Holberg Prize laureate, she has also worked extensively with contexts beyond the Western, including South Africa, and is concerned with generating a global perspective in research, thought, and literature. So welcome, Kari.
Thank you.
As we've also heard from the committee, the Holberg Prize laureate, Achille Mbembe, is an outstanding scholar in his field, or perhaps more correctly, fields in the plural. Could you provide us with sort of an introduction to what those fields are, or the field is, in a sense?
Well, at least I can try. As you heard, Mbembe is a professor of his historian, and he's a philosopher. But first of all, I think about him as a thinker about power, and how power functions in the modern world, and how power affects different populations really unequally. In that sense, he's been working with critical race theory, and he's been working within the field called post-colonialism, thinking about how imperialism, colonial times have reshaped our world in power dimensions that it still affect us today. Post-colonialism is a field that has been for a long time been thinking about not only like how power functioned in the colonial enterprise, but how it affects us today. And Mbembe, with his book on the post-colony, shifts that discussion really centrally into the African terrain, showing how European colonial powers played God in Africa, almost like saying, like, let there be enlightenment, let there be light, and then shape the whole continent according to their own needs and wishes, producing both the continent and the African person as someone to be exploited, not fully human, and what kind of effects that also has on the African population today. But what is really important with Mbembe, I think, is also that he takes this thinking further, because it's not something that only affects Africa, it affects how we think about power in the global world today. And he has also this, which I think is really interesting, this trajectory that the becoming black of the world, where he is linking this inhumane production of humanity as something to be exploited, not fully human. And he sees the same kind of tendencies in today's neoliberal capitalist economy, where technology takes more and more over and kind of produces everyone as a thing or something to be exploited. So what he says is that at this time, moment in time, we're actually facing a time where what it means to be human is radically changed at the very same time as we're facing destruction of everything, and how to kind of like think that. And from that kind of perspective, he thinks that it's important to, he's working with this concept of in common, to think in common, but that we really, to think the in common from Africa gives us a completely different view of trying to think about the challenges that the whole humanity and the whole planet is facing today.
And I think you, in your sort of first brief introduction to his trajectory now, underline a very important point, and that is sort of his ambition to think the world from Africa. Yeah? So there is a kind of a dialectic between Africa and the world, in a sense. Could you say something more about that? I mean, how would you say he thinks the world from Africa in your view? For instance, through notions such as necropolitics, for instance.
I was going to try to link precisely that, because I think one of his really important terms that also has opened up for a very new kind of thinking about how power works in the world is this concept of necropolitics that he develops shortly after his book on the post-colony. And necropolitics he's working with several thinkers, of course. We find Carl Schmitt's thinking on the sovereign power, we find Foucault's on biopower, we find Mbembe on the state of exception. But what then Mbembe does with this necropolitics is try to make a theory of, in order for democracies to kind of sustain themselves, take care of their people and how power works in that, there will always be some populations that are written out of this narrative. There's some populations that are produced to live in a state between life and death, not fully alive and being able to be killed like without no one caring, really. And he traces that back to first the colonial enterprise and the production of the slave, and then the production of the slave, animal, native, and then he traces it through the slave trade and to the plantation economy on the plantations, where black people were forced to live and work under conditions that was in this kind of like deathly. But then he also goes further and said, okay, this is something that is reproduced in our late modern time as well. And he thinks about modern warfare as one of the things that it reproduced, like how you just go straight into like Afghanistan or Iraq and just bomb everything, and then you just withdraw, leaving everything in chaos. And then he also uses this production of a surplus population in poor areas that are also underlying a certain way of power, and he also uses Gaza as one of the prime examples of how then necropolitics functions today, where you have a population that is completely just put off from the rest of the world. It's blockades, they don't get food, they don't get, and then they get bombed regularly, intermittently, living in this state between life and death, which of course is very on the agenda also to today. So yeah. So, but of course, you started to ask, what does it mean to think this from Africa? But it's also this, okay, we have this history that started someplace. We can find some of the beginning of this way of doing power exactly in the colonization of Africa. And to have that viewpoint opens up for a different kind of analysis of the global world as such. Yeah. But can I just add something?
Please add.
But Mbembe is also really interested in trying to think universally. Yes. So thinking from Africa, for him, means that you are situated in a certain place, that you have a certain standpoint or viewpoint to think from, but the whole point is to try to think the in common. He's very critical to all forms of identity politics. He's all very critical to like groups having different viewpoints on this and that. The whole thing is to make a common viewpoint so that we can think everything anew. And when he's talking about what we need today is to think like planetary, it means not only reinventing what humanity is, but also, because that's another really important term in his thinking, is entanglement, to see how we're all entangled with each other, and that humans beings, other species, but not only humans and species, but the whole world, geological time, everything. So how can we think that in common? And there's another place that he kind of thinks that, yeah, we can go to some certain traditions, non-Western knowledge traditions, that will make that possible for us. For example, an African thinking of animism that is thinking not the human being is separate from the world around it. So that's also a different way of thinking from Africa, but that concerns us all.
It's a very concrete way to illustrate his way of thinking Africa from the world, I think. The Holberg Prize Laureates that we award the prize to, normally you could say of all these that they have shaped or redirected certain fields, you know. And certainly you could say that about previous Holberg Prize Laureates. But how could you say that about this year's Holberg Prize Laureate, Achille Mbembe? Can we say that after his work, after his contributions, we have to rethink certain notions? I mean, can we think post-colonial studies, for instance, in the same way? Or can we think critical theories of race in the same way after Mbembe? Or are there other fields that he could be said to have sort of shaped, in a sense?
Well, I think we touched upon some of these things with his concept of both necropolitics and his concepts of entanglement, and I think they are really reshaping how we understand the world and how we can do critical theory at all. And of course, he's not original in the sense that he thinks completely different from everyone else. I mean, he builds on a lot of different thinkers, but he has a very, very distinct voice and opens up post-colonial theory and critical race theory for the thinking of the universal, and I think that's where he has made the most prominent influence in the later times. So, yeah.
And just to follow up on that, I mean, you mentioned the notion of necropolitics. You mentioned notions also of how he has a theory of the becoming black of the world, a kind of genealogy or a possible future, you could say, that he draws from his African research. But is there any hope in Mbembe, or is he, firmly a critical theorist?
I remember he said that he was asked in an interview, like, do you despair? Because what the picture he paints to us is pretty bleak. I mean, this is our existence that is at stake. It's power that operates really destructively and affects different people. And he answered, well, no, in Africa you're not allowed to despair. So I'm not despairing. I'm always trying to find some kind of futurity in the thinking. And you can even trace that back to On the Post-Colony, that was read as a really bleak kind of work, pointing to this massive destruction and reorganization of land and populations. But the whole point of that work as well was to try to find, okay, how can we think forward? And that's been the leading guidance principle of his thinking ever since. How can we get forward from this? And of course, it's very critical to this easy getting forwards too, right? Because he does read, when he reads from Africa, right, how the black person then is constructed as animal, slave, native, and then he reads all these critiques that also comes from this production, like this black is beautiful, negritude, we have to take back our humanity. And he's also very critical of that, because he's very afraid of this kind of new identity politics, like this new kind of reverse racism, nationalism. He's really, really critical to all kind of nationalism. He's actually trying to think the whole world beyond the nation state. That's why you have to think the planet and not the nation state.
So that's the significance of the notion, the planetary, in his thoughts.
Yes. To think from the planet all together. But it's very, and of course, like the title of his last book too, like Last Reflections on Utopia. There is a utopian streak in all his kind of thinking, but it's not an easy utopia. And it's also, to just point back to what the rector said about the prize, like how critical thinking is becoming more and more important in our times. He also says that critical thinking can only be important in our world if we are able to think critical thinking from the perspective of the planet. But critical thinking is what he really wants to survive. We need that kind of critical thinking, and we need the whole history of philosophy, like Western philosophy, non-Western philosophy. We all have to think that together from the planet.
So there is a bit of a paradox here, and this is the last question to you, between this sort of, or a tension perhaps, between thinking the world from Africa and his also being a universalist in a sense.
Yeah. Well, which is lovely in some way, because we have been thinking like from the Western world always like, the universal, right? And then this universalism have been critiqued a lot, very, very well founded as such. But the alternative then to universalism is the new form of apartheid, like a self-inflicted apartheid, when like everyone is supposed to think from themselves, and that doesn't build a community. But to switch the viewpoint from where you think the universal from, and not only, of course, thinking it from Africa, he does that, but you can think it from different ways, places, but the universal, our common faith on this planet is what's really at stake here.
Thank you very much, Kari. We could have talked about the Holberg Prize Laureate for hours, but we will have to also move on to our Nils Klim Prize Laureate and the expert we have with us, Kjetil Rommetveit. Kjetil Rommetveit is a professor of Science, Technology and Society at the Center for the Study of the Sciences and Humanities at the University of Bergen. And Rommetveit has particularly worked on issues such as governance and the politics of technoscience, for instance, in the context of biomedicine, regimes of security, and datification of our societies. He's also critically engaged notions of energy transitions and climate policies. And that particular aspect is also quite relevant for our laureate today, I think. So welcome, Kjetil.
Thank you.
As we've heard from the Nils Klim Committee, the Nils Klim Prize Laureate is an outstanding young scholar in his fields in several ways. Could you provide us an overview in much the same way as Kari has of the field, or here I think we have to say fields, of this year's Nils Klim Prize Laureate?
Well, I can try.
Yes.
I think fields is the correct way of approaching it. But I would say as a starting point that Sareen's work can be located quite broadly in, let's say, three main fields of study, or disciplines, if you like. So that would be, on the one hand, human geography, which is the more social science and humanistic approach to geography. Then it's political ecology, dealing with the politics of nature, the politics of resource production, distribution, consumption, and so on. And then, as was mentioned before, development studies. So you also have this, where especially I guess this north-south dimension is also present to his work. But then what he's doing is to perhaps cut across these fields and also engage with what was mentioned in the announcement from the committee with particular phenomenon such as energy transition. So taking energy transition as a quite fundamental fact about our societies at this point in time. And then you get new perspectives also on these other fields that I mentioned, and you perhaps also see new fields that are emerging around things such as large-scale infrastructures, energy systems, and so on. So in that sense, he takes part in a quite broad reconfiguration, potentially, of well, fields within the social sciences mainly, I would say, yeah.
And how would you say that his work within those fields have reshaped them in a sense? I mean, could you say something about the impact that Sareen's work has made? I mean, we know that there is an enormous research dissemination from his many projects. But I mean, beyond the volume, could you say something about the impact or?
Well, it's still early days to say exactly how his research will impact all of these broader fields. I mean, this takes time to see how it plays out. But it seems quite certain to me that he is impacting these fields and changing them by the ways in which he is capable of articulating, well, what are the important problems to be dealt with in these fields, and also how to engage with them in specific, well, mainly social scientific ways so trying to recast problems that have been traditionally assigned to, let's say, engineers or natural scientists or to managers, and to bring these perspectives of energy transition into the social sciences in a way that also takes into account some of the basic ways of knowing of the social sciences, concepts such as accountability relating to a transition from one energy regime to another. Let's say we are transitioning from a fossil regime to a renewables regime, for instance, which is important to his research. So it's exactly this work that takes, well, to some extent, established concepts such as accountability, or equity and social justice and participation, democracy, those kind of things, to reconfigure them in a way, to see how they play out in new ways, also along, the very complex components of the energy systems, and see how can they be approached also in these ways. And he's been doing this in very effective ways, and he's connecting a lot of researchers and a lot of perspectives. So the impact is certain to be there. Yeah.
So would you say also that there is a kind of a, much like a Holberg Prize Laureate, there's also a kind of a global component that is important to Sareen's research?
Yes, I mean the whole notion of that is being discussed about, well, how could we understand citizenship in relation to or how could we understand democracy or being a public in relation to problems that are so entangled across the north and the south, as well, as was mentioned here before, the notion of entanglement. Sareen is himself from India. He's also studying. He keeps a keen eye on what is going on also on that continent, and he also has made, well, an impressive amount of studies across the north and the south of Europe.
I asked Kari about the Holberg Prize Laureate and the notion of hope. I mean, we live in bleak times. Would you say that Sareen's research and his way of thinking is also an approach that affords some hope in terms of energy futures or human futures related to the planetary, or would you say his work is more in the kind of critical vein?
Yeah, well, I mean, you could say it's in a critical vein, but it would not be in the same way as with Mbembe, I think, the classical critical scholarship. It's also about, you know, articulating pathways into the future, possibilities that are also present in this moment of a transition. So, well, he's both critical, but he's also pointing to possible pathways for the future. So there is a balance there that is quite interesting and quite unique, I think, to both critical perspectives, because we know that you know, not everything is going well in this transition phase that we are imagining ourselves to be in. But we also know that something is happening. So how do you engage with this, also in productive ways? How do you point to the sites of action that are actually productive and where we should be engaging? So in that sense, I would say there is hope in that. And there is also hope in trying to you know, analyze the situation that we are in. And, well, and maybe he is also placing hope himself in the possibility that we are going to manage this transition and that somehow there is a renewables world that is waiting on the other side. We have to ask him about that.
We have to ask him about that. And a last question to you before we have to round off there. What you indicated now towards the end also seems to point out that there is a broader societal significance to his research. Could you give us a headline or two of what that might be, in a sense?
Well, I mean, you can just look at the world right now and some of the headlines. How do we discuss, you know, the whole energy situation, particularly sustainability, climate change, those kinds of questions. So going beyond the headlines and trying to analyze the situation in slightly cooler, still engaged terms is really important. And that's what he does. He's also very much present. He's a kind of transdisciplinary scholar. He will also express himself using poetry or comics, and he will be present at all kinds of festivals and going on in the place where he is. When he was in Bergen, he was very actively involved also with, you know, the local public life and so on. And I know he is doing the same in Stavanger. So in that sense, very much a situated transdisciplinary scholar.
So that's also a commonality between the two laureates, I think, the kind of way in which they use lots of academic and non-academic registers to convey their thoughts and domains, and it's something we will have to leave for June, I think, to bring up again when both laureates are here. Thank you for that, Kjetil, and also to you, Kari. Both panelists have shed, I think, considerable light on the two laureates we have for 2024, so thank you very much.
And Bjørn Enge Bertelsen for sharing their insights on the laureates in this interesting discussion. Let me remind the audience that the award ceremonies and other events related to the Holberg Prize will take place here in Bergen from the 4th to the 6th of June, and in Oslo on the 7th of June. To conclude, on behalf of the Holberg Board, I would like to extend my warmest congratulations to Professor Achille Mbembe and Professor Sareen on being awarded their respective prizes. Thank you to all those attending the ceremony today and to those watching around the world. Thank you.